IXL Section U.10, solve a system of equations using elimination. Today we're going to go over the third way you could solve a system of equations. We already learned two other ways. The first way was by doing a graph, and where the two lines intersect, that's the solution. The second way that we did last class is by substitution. You could use both of those methods in any of today's questions. However, depending on the question, like the questions you're going to get today are solved easiest by doing a process called elimination. And what elimination is the two equations, what you're trying to get, okay? For the first couple questions, they're going to give they're going to give the equations to you in this form, but then after the first couple of equations, you got to put them in this form. What you're trying to get is what you see here, opposite y terms or opposite x terms. What I mean by that is if you look at the y terms right here, they're opposites. They're positive 6y and negative 6y. You need to get that in the system of equations in order to be able to do elimination. And when you don't have that, you could still get it. I'll show you how in a second by multiplying. I'll show you in a second, okay? But basically, once you have that situation where you have opposite y terms or it could be opposite x terms, they both work, okay? So once I have that situation, that allows me to do this. Let me write the question. Let me write the system of equations over here. I didn't write that good. Let me write that better. 10x plus 6y equals 12. And then negative 7x minus 6y equals 6. Okay. Now, because I have opposite y terms, what I could do is I could add the two equations, all right? I could add them, and that's going to eliminate the y terms, okay? That's why it's called solving a system of equations using elimination. So when I add the two equations, right here I'm going to do 10x minus 7x, and that's going to give me 3x. 6y plus negative 6y gives me 0. So I'm not going to write it because that's what I wanted. I wanted to eliminate either the y terms or the x terms, one or the other. Okay, and 12 plus 6 will give me 18. Now I eliminated one of the variables, so now I have an equation with just one variable, x, and I could solve for that one variable. X is going to equal 18 divided by 3. So x is going to equal 6. That gives me the first part of my answer, the coordinate for x. Before I continue, I mean, you could probably guess what's the next step. But before I continue, let me just finish it off before I do it in Spanish. All right. So if x equals 6, now you got to substitute the x equals 6 wherever you want. You could substitute it in the top equation or the bottom equation, whichever one you think will be easier, in order to solve for y. Let me substitute it into the top equation. Let me do it in a different color. All right, so when I plug in the 6 in the top equation, I'm going to have 10 times 6 plus 6y equals 12. Okay, that'll give me 60 plus 6y equals 12. Now I subtract 60 from both sides, and that's going to give me 6y equals negative 48. So y equals negative 48 divided by 6. So y equals negative 8. All right, so that's my answer for the y coordinate. And there I have my answer. Okay, for this IXL, you're definitely going to need paper to work out the problems. I needed to work out the problems on paper. Okay, it's pretty... There was maybe one or two in the whole thing that I just did mental math, but most of them I had to work out on paper. All right, let me explain that in Spanish, okay? En español, hoy vamos a ver la tercera manera de resolver un sistema de ecuaciones. La primera manera que aprendimos era haciendo un gráfico y donde las dos líneas intersectan, ahí es donde está la solución de ese sistema de ecuaciones. La segunda manera lo hicimos en la última clase, que era um, sustitución. Y la tercera manera es eliminación, que es lo que vamos a hacer hoy. Eliminación es cuando tienen un sistema de ecuación y vamos a eliminar o el variable x o el variable y. ¿Cómo lo eliminamos? La manera que lo eliminamos es, queremos tener esta situación. Okay, los primeros problemas nos dan ya la ecuación en esta forma, pero lo que vienen después lo tenemos que poner en esta forma, que les voy a enseñar cómo. Pero queremos tener términos opuestos para y o x, uno o el otro. Lo necesitamos para poder hacer eliminación. Okay, así que aquí tengo términos opuestos, positivo 6y y negativo 6y. Cuando tengo esa situación, eso me deja sumar las dos ecuaciones. Ok, sumo los términos de x con el de x. 10x más negativo 7x me da 3x. Y aquí cuando sumo 6y más negativo 6y, eso me da 0. Así que cancela el término de y me lo elimina. Ok, así que ahora tengo una ecuación con solamente un variable x. Aquí en este lado me dio 12 más 6 es 18. Así que 3x es igual a 18. Y ahora puedo simplemente dividir 18 por 3 para saber el valor de x, que es 6. Así que eso me da la primera parte de mi respuesta. A la vez que yo sé que x es 6, la segunda parte ya lo hemos hecho. Se tiene que sustituir 6 para x en cualquiera de las dos ecuaciones. Escoge la que tú creas que va a ser más fácil. Yo lo sustituí en la ecuación de arriba. Así que hice 10 por 6, que me dio 60, resto 60 del otro lado y me dio negativo 48. Y ahora divido por 6 y eso me da el valor de y, que es negativo 8. Y ahí tengo mi respuesta. Okay, the next problem, again, it's already, the first couple problems, they already have a situation like this set up for you. So it's pretty obvious what you got to do, okay? Otra vez en este problema ya tienen términos opuestos aquí. Puede ser para y o para x, no importa, ok? Pero este lo tiene también para y. Así que voy a sumar las dos ecuaciones. Alright, so I'm going to add the two equations. And when I add them, that's going to eliminate the y variable. Alright, so I add them. I'm going to get 7x. These terms cancel out. Equals 7. Because negative 12 plus 19 is 7. So x is going to equal 7 divided by 7. So x equals 1. Alright, so that's my x coordinate. Now, once I have the x coordinate, I substitute it in whichever equation you want and solve for y. I'm going to do it on the top one, okay? A la vez que yo sé el coordinado de x, cuánto es, lo puedo sustituir en cualquiera de las dos ecuaciones para resolver para y. Alright, so this is going to give me 4 minus 2y equals negative 12. I subtract 4 from both sides. So now I got negative 2y equals negative 16. So y equals negative 16 divided by negative 2. So y equals positive 8. And there's my answer. Alright, next example. Okay, I believe this is the last one that already has the opposite terms for you. After this one, I believe they don't have it, and I'll go over how to get them. Okay? So again, I'm going to add the two equations, okay? Si me recuerdo, este es el último ejemplo que tiene los términos opuestos ya ahí para ustedes. Okay, lo que vienen después de esto, ustedes tienen que primero multiplicar para coger los términos opuestos, que les voy a enseñar cómo hacer eso en un momento. Así que aquí voy a sumar y eso me elimina el término de y. Es una coincidencia que hasta ahora solamente siempre es para el término y. También te lo pueden poner así para el término de x. It's just a coincidence that the first three examples, it's the y that keeps getting eliminated. They could easily have done it for the x term, as you'll see later on. All right, so in this example, x is going to equal -3. And I'm going to plug in that value for x on the bottom equation because that one looks easier to me. Ok, a la vez que sé que x es igual a -3, lo estoy sustituyendo en la ecuación de abajo porque me parece más fácil. Alright, so y equals 5. Okay. Alright, this example is slightly different. It's still pretty easy. Alright, but it's slightly different. If you're new to this, you should pay attention, okay? Este ejemplo es un poquitico diferente, okay? Alright, so if you look at the system of equations, I do not have opposite terms because this is -10y and this is also -10y. What I want is a -10y and a positive 10y. All right, so the way you could do it, there's two different ways you could think about it. Okay, one way you could think about it is, hold on. All right, one way you can think about it is like this. Instead of adding the equations, you could also subtract the equations if you want. It still works, right? So instead of adding the equations, I'm going to subtract this equation. All right? This is one way to think about it. I'll tell you a second way you could think about it in one moment, okay? Una manera que pueden pensar de esto, de cómo hacer es, porque aquí no tengo términos opuestos, tengo el mismo término. Y lo que quiero es que uno sea negativo y el otro positivo. Así que pueden pensar de este problema que lo voy a restar una ecuación menos la otra ecuación. Eso se puede hacer y te da la respuesta bien. Okay. Así que si restan, tienen que pensar de cómo este signo negativo trabaja con estos signos. ¿Ok? Dos signos negativos se cambian a un positivo. All right? So when I go to subtract this, it's going to be -7x minus -5x. Those two negatives become a positive. So -7x plus 5x is going to give me -2x. Okay, -10y minus -10y will become -10y plus 10y, which cancels out because it gives you 0. And -19 minus -5 is going to become -19 plus 5, which gives you -14. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, let me tell you another way that you could have done it. I think the other way you may get it easier now that I think about it, because it will just be the same way I was doing it before, which is like this, okay? What I could do is multiply the bottom by -1. If you multiply the entire bottom, okay, let me say it like this, because you're going to be doing this on all the problems coming up, okay? You're going to have to multiply the entire equation by a number in order to get opposite x terms or opposite y terms. So in this example, I could multiply the entire bottom equation, if I wanted to, by -1 in order to get opposite y terms. If I multiply the entire bottom by -1, it'll become this. Okay, everything on the bottom changed to the opposite sign. -1 times -5x makes it positive 5x. I'm doing this basically. This is what I'm doing to the bottom. And you know what? I'm going to explain it this way because this applies to all the problems coming up, okay? So I'm multiplying the entire bottom, everything, by -1 in order to get this new equation on the bottom that will allow me to eliminate the y term, okay? So I'm going to explain it that way, all right? Even though you could also think about it as subtracting the two equations. Ok, lo voy a explicar de esta manera porque esta manera lo vamos a usar para todos los ejemplos que vienen que faltan por hacer, okay, en esta lección. Si multiplico la ecuación de abajo, todos los términos por -1, okay, eso me da lo que quiero, que es términos opuestos aquí para y, ¿ok? Y ahora puedo hacer lo que estaba haciendo antes, de sumar las dos ecuaciones. También pueden pensar de restar las dos ecuaciones, pero para hacerlo de una manera igual para todos los ejemplos, lo voy a hacer de esta manera. Alright, so now when I add, I'm going to get negative 2x. These two cancel out, and this will give me negative 14. So x is going to equal negative 14 divided by negative 2. So x is going to equal positive 7. Alright, so that's the first part of my answer. And now I could substitute that 7 where x is in any of the two equations. I'm going to do it in the bottom equation. Ok, ahora puedo sustituir x igual a 7 en cualquiera de las dos ecuaciones. Lo voy a hacer en la ecuación de abajo. So I got that. So I multiply negative 5 times 7. I get negative 35 minus 10y equals negative 5. And now I'm going to move the negative 35 to the right by adding. So I'm running out of space, but negative 10y equals 30. So y equals 30 divided by negative 10. So y equals negative 3. All right, let's look at another example. All right, so look at this example. Here I don't have any opposite terms at all. I don't even have the same number on the top or the bottom, okay? But it's very simple. Okay, so what you should do is this. Okay, you have more than one option, okay? I would think about it this way. The equation on the bottom, you could multiply either the entire thing, the entire bottom equation by positive 10. If I multiply the entire bottom equation by positive 10, I'll have this. I multiplied everything on the bottom by 10, okay, in case you don't get what I just did. I multiplied everything on the bottom by 10. That gave me 10x minus 10y equals 110. I could have also done, instead of that, I could have also done, I'm going to leave it like that because I haven't done any yet where the x eliminates, where the x terms eliminate. So I'm going to leave it like that. But just to explain, another way you could have done it is the bottom equation, multiply everything by negative 3. Okay, if you multiply the bottom equation, everything by negative 3, you'd have this equation. The top is still the same. This is the top. The bottom would become negative 3x plus 3y equals negative 33. Whichever way you do it, they're both going to end up giving you the same answers for x and y. I'm going to do the top one just because it eliminates x, okay? But if you look at the bottom, if you okay, you could do it that way as well. In fact, the numbers are easier on the bottom, but whatever, just to do it so that it eliminates the x term, I'm going to do the top one, all right? Before I do it though, let me just say that in Spanish real quick. Ok, aquí tenemos varias opciones, ok? Una opción es lo que hice aquí, lo escribí en rojo aquí. Una opción es multiplicar la ecuación de abajo por 10, todos los términos por 10. Si lo multiplico todos los términos por 10, me da lo que tengo aquí y ahora me da términos opuestos para x. Ya tenía negativo 10x y me di cuenta que si multiplico la ecuación de abajo por 10, me daría aquí positivo 10x y puedo eliminar, eso me deja eliminar los términos de x. La otra manera que lo pudieran haber hecho es multiplicar, si queremos eliminar el término de y, podría haber multiplicado la ecuación de abajo todo por negativo 3. Si multiplico lo de abajo por negativo 3, me daría lo que ven aquí. Y eso me da términos opuestos para y, que cuando sumo la ecuación me va a cancelar el término de y solamente tendré el término de x. Lo voy a hacer de esta manera porque no he hecho un ejemplo donde eliminamos el término de x. Alright, así que voy a sumar las dos ecuaciones. Alright, so when I add these, negative 10x plus 10x cancels out. Negative 3y plus negative 10y is negative 13y. And negative 19 plus 110 is going to give me 91. So now y is going to equal 91 divided by negative 13, and y is going to equal negative 7. Again, if I would have done it this way, you end up getting the same answers in the end. Okay. All right. So y equals negative 7. And now I'm going to substitute that value in one of the two equations for y to solve for x. I'm going to put it in the bottom of the equation because it looks simpler. Ok, voy a sustituir negativo 7 para y en la ecuación de abajo. So x plus 7 equals 11. So x equals 11 minus 7. I wrote that kind of messed up. But so x is going to equal 4. And there's my answer. Okay. All right, now look at this equation here. It should be obvious if you know your timetables, if you look at this, that the easiest move, again, there's more than one option, more than one correct way to do this, all right? But I think it should be obvious to everybody that the easiest move would be to multiply the top equation by 2. If you multiply all the terms in the top equation by 2, it would give you opposite terms for y, because you'd have positive 10y on the top, okay? Si miran este sistema de ecuaciones, creo que es obvio que lo más fácil sería multiplicar todos los términos de arriba por 2 para tener términos opuestos para y. So if I multiply the top by 2, I'm going to have the following. Negative 12x plus 10y equals 40. And on the bottom, 7x minus 10y equals 10. Now I can add the two equations, okay? Ahora sumo las dos ecuaciones, and I'm going to have negative 5x equals 50. So x equals 50 divided by negative 5. So x equals negative 10. All right, now I'm going to substitute x equals negative 10. Let me put it in the top equation. Ahora voy a sustituir x igual a negativo 10. Lo voy a poner en la ecuación de arriba. Let me just do that in a different color so it's more obvious or more visible. So negative 6 times negative 10 plus 5y equals 20. So this will be 60 plus 5y equals 20. Subtract 60. So 5y equals negative 40. Y equals negative 40 divided by 5, so y equals negative 8. And there's my answer. Okay, here we have another example where the easiest move would be to try to get a 5 on the bottom here. A 5, and since you want it to be the opposite sign, you should multiply the entire bottom by negative 5 so that this will give you a positive 5y. Alright? I could have also done something with the x term instead, but that's going to be more work in this example. Alright? Debe ser obvio que lo más fácil sería multiplicar la ecuación de abajo por negativo 5 para que te dé un término opuesto aquí abajo, positivo 5y. Alright, now I'm going to add the two equations, and I'm going to get negative 7x. The y's cancel out, and 56. So x equals 56 divided by negative 7. So x equals negative 8. Now I'm going to substitute negative 8 for x on the bottom equation because it looks a little easier. Ahora voy a sustituir negativo 8 para x en la ecuación de abajo porque me parece más fácil. So it would be 3 times negative 8 minus y equals negative 14. So 3 times negative 8 is negative 24. Let's add 24 to both sides. So negative y equals 10. So if I divide, so y equals, let's say like this, y equals 10 divided by negative 1. So y equals negative 10. All right. Okay, so this one, you have a couple different options. You could either multiply the top by negative 3 or just multiply the bottom by negative 1. I think the easiest would be to multiply the bottom by negative 1. Okay, creo que lo más fácil en esta sería multiplicar la ecuación de abajo por negativo 1 para cambiarle los signos a todos los términos y coger términos opuestos de x. Or you could just think about it as subtracting the two equations. That would work as well. But just for the sake of doing it the same way and so that more people will understand it, I'm just going to keep it that way. So when I multiply everything here by negative 1, I'm going to get positive 10x minus 3y equals positive 8. Now when I add them, the x terms eliminate. I'll have negative 2y equals negative 8. So y equals negative 8 divided by negative 2. So y equals 4. Okay, now if I substitute y equals 4 on the top equation, I'm going to have, let me do it over here. I'm going to have negative 10x plus 4 equals negative 16. Move the 4 to the right by subtracting, which will give me negative 20. So negative 10x equals negative 20, so x equals negative 20 divided by negative 10. So x equals 2. Alright guys, for the sake of time, I'm going to jump to the harder problems that you may see. Although I don't have too many examples like them. Alright, let me see something. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to do 2 more examples, and they're like the type of examples you're going to have in the challenge zone. Alright, so you may want to pay attention to these last 2. Okay, estos últimos 2 ejemplos que voy a hacer son lo que son lo más duro. Okay, the reason they're a little bit more difficult is because you're going to have to multiply both the top as well as the bottom by a number in order to get opposite terms. Okay, la razón que estos son más duros es porque van a tener que multiplicar las dos ecuaciones por un número para coger términos opuestos. Alright, so if you look at these, right? Okay, like if you look at, let's say if you look at the x terms, if you know your timetables, the least common multiple of 6 and 10 is 60. So if I try to get 60s, like a 60 on the top and a 60 on the bottom, I'd have to multiply. I'd have to do something like multiply the entire top by 6 and the entire bottom by negative 10 in order to get opposite terms. Or another option is to try to get opposite y terms, but the least common multiple of 8 and 6 is 24. You could also do 48, but that's going to make the problem bigger. The numbers bigger, I should say. All right, so if you, the least common multiple of 8 and 6 is 24. So if you try to do that, then you'd have to multiply the entire top by 3 and the entire bottom by negative 4. Okay, so there's a few more options, but those are basically it, okay? I'm going to do the 61, all right? Which means, actually, before I do that, let me just explain that in Spanish, okay? But I'm going to do the 61. En español, aquí tenemos una situación donde tenemos que multiplicar las dos ecuaciones por un número para poder tener términos opuestos para X o para Y. Tenemos varias opciones, pero básicamente le voy a decir dos opciones, ¿ok? Si trato de coger términos opuestos para X, el múltiple más chiquito que tienen en común, 6 y 10, es 60. Actually, I just remembered, it's not 60, it's 30. Sorry guys, I'm recording this video late. So instead of 60, I'm gonna get these to be 30. I just realized that. I'm sorry. I said 60 by accident. Okay, so I'm gonna get them to be 30, not 60. Okay, el múltiple más chiquito que tiene el 6 y el 10 en común sería 30. Okay, así que si hago eso, tendría que hacer algo como multiplicar la ecuación de arriba por 3 para coger negativo 30x aquí y el de abajo por negativo 5 para coger positivo 30x abajo. O la otra opción sería, si quiero coger términos opuestos para y, el múltiple más chiquito que tienen el 8 y el 6 en común sería 24. Así que puedo multiplicar el término de arriba por 3 para coger 24y y el de abajo por negativo 4 para coger negativo 24y. Ok, estas son algunas de las opciones. Voy a hacer la opción de multiplicar para coger 30x y negativo 30x. Ok, alright, so what I'm going to do, is multiply the top by 3. And I'm going to multiply the bottom by negative 5. There's other ways you could have done this, okay? So if you had a different idea, yeah, you could probably do it. You could definitely do it. Other options, right? But I don't have time to go over every possible option, okay? So anyways, when you multiply the top by 3, I'm going to get negative 30x plus 24y equals 12. And when I multiply the bottom by negative 5, I'm going to get positive 30x minus 30y equals negative 30. Okay, now when I add the two equations, the x terms cancel out. The y terms, I'm going to get negative 6y equals 12 plus negative 30, which is the same as 12 minus 30, is going to be negative 18. So y is going to equal negative 18 divided by negative 6. So y equals positive 3. Okay, once I know what y equals, I'm going to substitute y equals 3 into any of the equations in order to solve for x. I'm going to substitute it into the bottom equation, okay? Como ya sé que y es igual a 3, lo voy a sustituir en la ecuación de abajo para resolver para x. Alright, that's going to give me negative 6x plus 18 equals negative 6. Subtract 18 from both sides. And that'll give you negative 6x equals negative 24. So x equals negative 24 divided by negative 6. So x equals 4. Alright, I'm going to do one more example like this, alright, where you got to multiply the top and the bottom both by a number. And this will be the last example. Okay, este es el último ejemplo y también es como el que acabo de hacer, donde tienen que multiplicar las dos ecuaciones por un número. Alright, so I look at this. Let me try not to make the same mistake. So I look at this and I do not have opposite terms on the top or on the bottom for x or y. Now, if I want to get opposite terms for x, okay, the least common multiple of 9 and 8 would be 72. So I'd have to multiply the top by positive 8 and the bottom by positive 9 in order to get 72x over negative 72x. You could do it that way, although that's going to give you some big numbers over here. It would probably be easier to deal with the y terms here. The least common multiple of 7 and 6 would be 42. So I could multiply the entire top by 6 and the entire bottom by 7, and that'll give me negative 42y over 42y, and that's what I'm going to do, okay? Let me just say that in Spanish before I do it. Alright, así que aquí, si quiero tener términos opuestos para x, el múltiple más chiquito que tienen en común el 9 y el 8 sería 72. Si hago esa opción, tendría que hacer algo como multiplicar la ecuación de arriba por 8 para tener un 72x aquí y el de abajo por 9 para tener negativo 72x aquí abajo. ¿Ok? Pero eso me va a dar números grandes por aquí. Va a ser más fácil en lugar de tener términos opuestos para y. El múltiple más chiquito que tienen en común 7 y 6 sería 42. Así que puedo multiplicar la ecuación de arriba por 6 y el de abajo por 7 para tener negativo 42y arriba y positivo 42y abajo. Así que voy a hacer eso. Alright, so I'm going to multiply the top by 6 and the bottom by 7. Alright, so when I do that, I'm going to get the following. I'm going to get on the top 54x minus 42y equals negative 96. And on the bottom, I'm going to get negative 56x plus 42y equals 84. Okay, now I could add the two equations. Okay, ahora voy a sumar las dos ecuaciones. And it's going to give me negative 2x equals negative 12. So x equals negative 12 divided by negative 2. So x equals positive 6. And then I'm going to substitute x equals 6 in one of the two equations to solve for y. I'm gonna put it in the bottom equation, okay? So voy a substituir x igual a 6 en la ecuación de abajo. That's going to give me negative 48 plus 6y equals 12. Move 48 to the right by adding. So 6y equals 60, so y equals 60 divided by 6, so y equals 10. And there's my answer. That's the solution to that system of equations. If I substitute those values for x and y on the top equation as well as on the bottom, it'll make the two equations true. Alright guys, that concludes today's lesson. The IXL is U10. Solve a system of equations using elimination. It's due by 6 a.m. the next day that you have my class. And like always, remember that you have to get up to 100 points. Alright guys, so that's it for today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next class. Take care.